So again, welcome to today's presentation, Protecting Welcoming Policies, Know Your Rights. My name is Anthony Salas. I am the Director of Events with Welcoming America. And before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping items for you. The webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording after this is done. Probably in the next few days. We'll get that over to you hopefully by the end of the week. So look for that coming your way. Because we are recording it and in the interest of just safety and security, any AI bots that are inserted into the webinar to record it will be removed because we'll be providing that to you. So just note on that. And then if you need anything during the presentation, if you have any technical questions or issues with the platform, please use the chat box where you're entering your locations now. Content-related questions, please use the Q&A feature for those. As the presentation goes on, when something comes up that stirs a question for you, go ahead and enter it into the Q&A, and then we're going to address those at the end of the presentation. All right, so why we are all here today. Would love to introduce you to our panelist speaker for today, Oliver Merino. Oliver is the Immigrant Justice Network Coordinator with ILRC, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. And needless to say, Oliver has been a very, very busy man as of late, but we are extremely grateful to him for taking the time to do this presentation for us. He has done it numerous times for many groups, and we're just honored that he is sharing his time and information with us today. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to him. Take it away, Oliver.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thank you to everyone for joining. Yeah, again, my name is Oliver. I work for the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. And for today's conversation, we'll be talking about just generally what has been immigration policy during this second Trump administration. A lot has happened in this just 2 months, so we won't be able to go too much into depth into one single action since there's been so many. But hopefully this presentation gives you just general context of what we're dealing with. I'm sure that you all have been also keeping up with the news and also hopefully taking time to decompress and not be constantly online or consuming news. From experience is not very healthy. So thank you again for joining. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little more information about the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, we've been around since 1979, and we do different things. We have a lot of attorneys, but also we have organizers, communicators, policy folks in the organization. We've grown a lot in just a few years. When I started in 2019, we were about 25. Now we're about 60 staff. We have 3 offices in 2 states and the District of Columbia. Our main office is in California. We have a couple of offices in Texas, and I work from our office in D.C. We provide capacity and resources for attorneys who want to learn about like the most recent developments around immigration policy, how to best advocate for their clients. We also provide support and help to support the leadership of organizers who are working in different campaigns at the local, state, and federal level. And we also, as I mentioned, we have folks who work around policy and changing policies in these different levels as well. I work specifically in the organization coordinating a network called the Immigrant Justice Network. Next slide, please. And the network itself focuses on the intersection of immigration and the criminal legal system. Part of our role is kind of tracking what's happening in Congress, and making sure that people who are immigrants or non-citizens and have had contact with the criminal legal system, that they're not excluded or targeted or further criminalized because of that contact. And so a lot of our work is at this moment very challenging, and we'll touch on some of that. How does that look like? But generally, as I mentioned, for today, want to give you some context about kind of what's been happening with the administration, kind of what does the terrain look like for immigration issues nationwide. And next slide, please. So in just this 2 months of the second Trump administration, as you all know, the president has used his executive power to push the limits of what he can do while he's in office. One of the challenges that also we're facing is that the Congress is controlled by Republicans. And what that means is in the past, when immigration proposals will either pass the House or pass the Senate, we had some opportunity to stop them in one of those two chambers. Right now, because there is a lack of resistance from Democrats, especially around immigration issues, it's uncertain whether anti-immigrant laws will actually be stopped. We'll talk about a little bit in a second about one of those that recently passed, and kind of what that tells us for the other proposals going forward and their probability of becoming law as well. The other thing to also highlight is that we're living through a moment of rapid expansion of immigration detention. We all know as well there's been an increase in immigration enforcement. I think we've all seen the stories and the cases of community members being picked up by ICE and targeted by ICE, and even folks who had temporary protection, those protections being stripped away from them and put into ICE's radar. So that's some of the context as well. There's been attacks on sanctuary cities and states. And I think, we'll talk about also that in a bit, how to, when cities have pro-immigrant policies, we know that the administration has been threatening to cut federal funding. And the other thing that I want to just also acknowledge is the targeting of dissent. So people who have been exercising their right to protest, to free speech, have been targeted, some of them immigrants. And again, an alarming trend. So this can seem very overwhelming. And we'll talk also how communities are responding. But it's clear, I think, to begin with this conversation with an acknowledgement of just how this moment that we're in actually looks like, and some of the concerns that and trends that we're seeing. Our community is definitely there is fear, there is concern, but also there is a lot of power that people have exercise and agency in this moment, and we also want to highlight those, but we don't want to kind of brush off just how worrisome the time that we're living in. So, next slide, please. Focusing on immigration enforcement and detention. Again, we are witnessing just in the first few months and in this just 2 months of the Trump administration, we've seen a wave of ICE arrest. Specifically, I think it was maybe 2 weeks after the administration came in office. There were a coordinated ICE activity across the country in different cities, in different states, all with the intention of intimidating and kind of sending a signal to our community that this was going to be something that they should expect going forward. One thing to highlight as well is that we have surpassed the ICE detention capacity at the moment. I think they were, or almost. I think they're funded to 50,000 beds, immigration detention beds. I think we're at 40, almost 47 or so at the moment. And this is a stark contrast to just 4 years ago when the Biden administration started, when we were about 15,000. And in just for a little bit over 4 years, we've seen this tremendous growth. On your screen, you see an article quoting a for-profit immigration detention CEO who expresses his enthusiasm in the moment that we're living in because of the possibility of more people being detained in these for-profit detention centers. At the moment, the majority of the people who are detained in for-profit detention. And yeah, so again, this is kind of like the context, some of the context where we were at. At the same time, next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, the Trump administration has been very quick in issuing executive orders to expand the detention and deportation of immigrants, of limiting access to asylum, access to people migrating into the U.S. These are just some of them. I'll take several slides to go through all of them, but he has issued, for example, executive orders to end birthright citizenship, to expand the collaboration between ICE and police, to, as I mentioned, to limit asylum, declare a national emergency at the border, which will free funding to militarize the border, further militarize the border. And more recently, there was an announcement that there was going to be a requirement for to register, for people to register who are in this country, either who are not citizens. So these are some of the efforts that he has taken to again, to send a message to our community that they're not welcome in this country. Some of these have been stopped by the courts. One thing to mention as well is that they have been challenged. In the past, I think folks were maybe a little more confident that the courts were going to be quick and deciding in our favor. I think right now, I think folks have some questions about some of these orders, whether they will be in the end implemented or not. So, but at least for now, one of the very important executive orders that we've been tracking, the birthright citizenship, has been stopped. And I know like folks have been also very concerned about the national registration requirement, and there's litigation already being prepared for that as well. This hasn't been implemented yet. So I know, again, maybe it's starting with this presentation as I'm going through all this, maybe not the best news, I know, I understand. And so, but again, want to be clear of kind of like the context that we're living in. And next slide, please. Going a little further on kind of what does this look like in Congress. I was mentioning some of the work that we do at ILRC is kind of tracking federal legislation and trying to either stop bad proposals from becoming law or stalling them, drawing attention to them, encouraging people to take action, to call their members of Congress, representatives, to stop them. In this Congress, as I mentioned earlier, there is a Republican majority that has very explicitly, accepted the president's a position to prevent either migration into the U.S. and to deport and detain as many people as possible. There are every year or every Congress there are many laws that are being proposed, many anti-immigrant laws that are proposed. Some of them never come to a vote. Some of them, as I mentioned earlier, were able to stop before they get passed, or once they one chamber. This Congress, we are more concerned than we've ever been about the probability of some of these anti-immigrant proposals from becoming law. One thing to highlight is that the first legislation that the president signed was this law that expanded detention and deportation in the country. It was called the Laken-Riley Act. And the name, of course, is taken from a young nurse in Georgia who was killed by someone who happened to be an immigrant. And Republicans used this tragedy to advocate for the expansion of detention and deportation. This law would trigger mandatory detention, meaning that somebody would not have the opportunity to fight for bail or challenge their or be able to fight their case outside of an immigration detention center. And so it expanding mandatory detention for people that are charged with quote unquote low level charges like shoplifting. And so there was a study that was done about this law that said that it would, if implemented, it would require 110,000 immigration detention beds and almost $80 billion to implement this bill. It's one of the concerns that we had about this law was that it moved very quickly in both chambers. Within weeks of being introduced, it was passed, and that's something that we're concerned about going forward. Whether other bills will follow a similar trajectory. So far, because of the um, funding fight that has been happening in Congress. A lot of that attention has been devoted to that. But there's, as I mentioned, a series of anti-immigrant bills that are kind of next that we're gonna have to fight. And as of right now, uncertain whether we have the support to either stall them or stop them. I mentioned there is a lack of opposition in Congress, especially around immigration, and there is, I think, the wrong lesson uh, from the election being taken, that that immigration is a problem in this country, and that voters agreed for mass detention and mass deportation, when there have been polls that show that people uh, do not agree with that, especially when folks are asked the question whether they agree with the mass deportation of people who have been here in this country for a long time, including families. So that is some of the context that we are facing in Congress. More recently, I was mentioning the budget negotiations. It ultimately passed. I'm sure some of you saw the many stories about the funding bill and the possible shutting down of the government. It ultimately didn't shut down, but the bill that was mostly, well, it was all Republican written bill. It passed, and it increased the funding for immigration enforcement by 500 million. And all of that will go again to target immigrant communities. So saying all this again to give you context of like what we're facing. At the same time, while there has been a lack of opposition in Congress around immigration issues, what we've seen across the country is that people have raised their voices, and that they've raised their support for immigrant communities. Next slide, please. Two things that I want to bring into the space is that, especially the work that we do, working with organizers across the country, and coalitions, people who are fighting to shut down detention centers, to pass pro-immigrant policies at the local and state level, to provide funding for legal representation for immigrants, folks that have been organizing and doing support for immigrant communities for years, are not waiting for Congress to show opposition. On your right, you see some of the mass mobilizations and protests that happened just a few weeks ago after the series of immigration enforcement actions. This one is in LA, but these were done. These happen in across the country, in big cities and small cities, in red states and blue states. All of this, it was a signal that, again, there is support for immigrant communities, and there is opposition to ICE arrest. On your left, you see something that we we've seen across the country as well, the creation of rapid response networks. This one's from Virginia, which is where I live. This is the one that when I go out, I give to the people that live around me. But the great thing is that folks have created their own rapid response networks to verify ICE activity in their community. This is something that has been happening organically, but also organizations that have been, as I mentioned, doing this organizing work and support for years have created infrastructure to give people their rights. And also there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation online around immigration enforcement. This type of network has been able to make sure that these ICE sightings are confirmed and that people are not panicking while when they see something online saying that there's ICE activity in their city or or where they live. Next slide, please. One of the most important things that is protecting people from ICE enforcement is knowing your rights. Here are the two pictures that show just the importance of knowing your constitutional rights that everybody should know. That applies to everybody, not just immigrants. But ILRC created the red card years ago, and we've been using it since years ago. And here, I mean, people are now know of the red card, and like what is specific, and I'm sure maybe you've seen it around. There's like different versions, or different maybe different colors, but specifically what it does say is, you know, that you don't have to open your door when an immigration agent comes to your door. You don't have to answer their questions. You don't have to sign anything, and you wish to exercise your constitutional rights to not answer their questions, and that you're asking for your attorney. So what we saw just and this happened even before inauguration, we received thousands and thousands of requests for the red card. At this point, we've received millions of requests for it as between November and January 20, I think, was the most that we've received requests in the history of the organization. We received so much that we had to stop the intake for requesting the card. These cards are totally free. There's no charge for people. But the amount of cards that we've gotten, or the requests that we've gotten, we had to close our intake, but people can still access them online. And when the enforcement actions happened, we know that where people were using their something, either the red card or something similar like the red card, about exercising their rights. This was confirmed by Tom Homan, who is the ICE director at the moment, criticizing the use of know your rights as a way to evade ICE arrest. I was anecdotally here from the DC area. If you go to a Latino-owned business, more than likely, especially around where I live, where people have been doing canvassing, regular canvassing since the inauguration, going to businesses, going to places where people they congregate. They've been doing uh, sharing in this information, talking to businesses and giving these red cards away, posting these on windows, going to apartment complexes and giving this to folks. It has been tremendously effective to give people the information that they need in case there is an interaction with the NICE agent. So again, we encourage people to bring these on their own. If I don't think we've opened them yet, the intake for requesting red cards, but all the different, there's like many different languages in our pages, in our page, and you can print them at home and have them so that you can give them to your neighbor. So next slide, please. Here's an example of the different know your rights information that I think it's been amazing to see being shared recently. Not just the red card, but also for specifically healthcare providers, for educators. What happens if you are in your card or in a place of business? What do you do if immigration comes to your door or has an interaction with you? There are many organizations, not just ILRC, that have created these resources for community members to understand what are their rights and also what to do and how to prepare before that ICE interaction happens. One thing I wanted to highlight there in the corner of the page is a family preparedness plan, which goes into what to, if somebody in your family may be at risk of ICE detention, what to prepare for before that happens, what type of documents to save, how to have a power attorney, like what does that mean for your bank account, for your making sure that you make preparations if you have children to make sure that you give a specific guidance of who will take care of that. And these are very tough conversations to have within your family, but it's better to have them now than at the moment of crisis when folks are having to worry about finding an attorney or locating somebody who's in detention. So all these things that you're able to do to prepare now, it's extremely important. So again, I just bring these examples as a way to highlight just the importance of knowing your rights, well, not just as an immigrant, but as someone who may be working at a place, and if thus come to your work, or you're in public, if you and if you're not directly impacted, how will you react uh, in that moment? Next slide, please. One thing, again, to highlight, and I've mentioned earlier, and I think it relates to the work that Welcoming America does, is for localities that have pro-immigrant policies. We know that the Trump administration has been targeting cities that understand that immigrants are part of their community, that value immigrants, that support immigrant communities. This is something that we've been tracking, and that we knew that it was coming. The Trump administration has threatened to cut funding from cities that don't cooperate with ICE. It was just in top of my mind because I was in a meeting yesterday about D.C., who's also right now concerned about this new proposal in Congress. But yeah, I mean, this is something very alarming, because the funding that would get cut affects everyone. These are resources that are used for healthcare programs, educational programs, infrastructure, things that benefit everyone, and they're using immigrants as a way to scapegoat. So if this funding were to be cut, it would affect about 700 communities across 28 states. So we're talking about, millions of people. Right now, the proposal in Congress is it hasn't been voted on yet. Earlier last month, there was, or this month actually, there was a congressional hearing with four mayors of what Republicans call sanctuary cities, and it was, I think, an opportunity for us to witness kind of what their arguments were going to be for attacking these communities. I think it didn't break through. I think, fortunately, it was great to see mayors like the mayor of Boston really strongly defending the record they have to support immigrant communities. And I think an example of how in this moment, when we have so many voices trying to vilify immigrants, that you're able to push against that and present the vision that that values community and that values people, and that makes the case for supporting pro-immigrant laws at the local level. So if you haven't seen her testimony, I mean, you don't have to do all the 3 hours or how many hours there are, but there's really amazing clips of her responding to really obnoxious questions in a great way. And I think something that it's been hard to see from elected officials lately, especially in Congress, kind of presenting a vision for pro-immigrant policies. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring this up. And again, I think we don't have a lot of time to go into these different updates, but I see there might be some questions. One thing I want to highlight is the ILRC has next slide, please, has been doing a series of immigration briefings since the start of the Trump administration. Um, I mean, I feel like some of the content in the presentation, there's updates that like happened just this week, and in these briefings that we do regularly, we were able to share with community members, with advocates about kind of what are the policy changes and the proposals that we should be keeping track of, and I think just the amount of information and the proposals from the Trump administrations have been overwhelming, and that's, I think, the intent to I think, one, create fear, and also to paralyze communities to prevent action. Well, what I've mentioned earlier is, this, despite all the kind of the anti-immigrant sentiment that is happening, and what's happening in Congress, what's coming down from the administration, and the messaging that we're hearing, that communities have responded by supporting one another and creating infrastructure to support their neighbors, to share their rights, to exercise their rights, and as much as we can to do to support welcoming policies in this moment. I think this is when it really matters. So I know that there is I think one question that was submitted earlier was about let me find it here. But essentially, it was about how maybe you can remind me. It's some of there, but I think it was this tension between kind of highlighting pro-immigrant policies, and at the same time knowing that the Trump administration is targeting cities that have them. So I think it is a real tension. I mean, something that we are witnessing here just locally from in the DMV area, as well. And from my thoughts is um, you know the attacks that have been happening against immigrant communities have been very public, and I think that is the intention, as I mentioned, to create fear, um, and there needs to be also a very public support of why we value immigrant communities in this moment, and I think having either elected officials or organizations um, being willing to make that case publicly and say that we are supporting our immigrant neighbors. It's what's needing in this moment. If you are concerned about whether you're a nonprofit organization, there is about what that would mean to you if you're concerned about targeting. There is I can share more information. I think it was the Council of Nonprofits who has resources about making sure that you are know what type of support that you're able to have. But yeah, I think overall, in this moment, as much as you can do to highlight the vision of welcoming wherever you're at. I kind of was reading where people were from. I mean, it is a challenging time, but as I said, this is kind of the moment where immigrant communities need your voice the most. And with that, maybe can start with some questions. Does ILRC have plans to translate the cards to other languages? That's a good flag. I can write East African language. Yeah. If you have specific languages that you can request, that you think would be helpful for your community, I can pass those on. I mean, if you see, we have many different ones in there, and I think some of them were added because they were requested. So if you have some specifically, definitely, I will write those down.
And Oliver, I'll also just mention, I did put into the chat the link to the page on the ILRC site that the cards are listed in the different languages that are currently available. So if you go to the chat, you'll see those, and you can click on that link, and I believe they're downloadable from there, so you can access them there.
Yeah, and yeah, again, feel free to send me an email. Maybe we can just include it with like the follow-up, but the translations, I think, we've been trying to be responsive to like the the needs for the community, and the languages needs. So yeah, if you send me an email, I will definitely put that request. And I would say it's more especially because folks are printing them at home. Like there's mm, I can't commit to doing it because I don't manage the Know Your Rights page, but I think it'll be easier to put that link there. I see the question about, is the biggest fear from elected officials in local communities is the funding of cities? What are the arguments we can make to continue to champion welcoming cities? That is definitely a fear that we've heard from elected officials. Just I can mention the ones that we've talked to, but we have heard of that. I think there's a concern about drawing attention in this moment from the administration, and that what that would mean. But again, uh, when there is no opposition or no other vision of immigration or embracing immigrants and supporting immigrants, like that opens the space for this type of anti-immigrant messaging. And yeah, I think highlighting of course, I think what type of arguments you can make, highlighting. I mean, a lot of these communities that again, I would suggest watching the testimony of Mayor Wu from Boston. I think she did a tremendous job mentioning and combating some of this misinformation and disinformation that was presented to her about specifically around immigrants and crime. I think that is a tough topic to focus to talk about, because that's often where the conversation goes. I would say, like, do not take that bait. there's so much to that you can highlight out about the immigrant community without kind of having the descent to that conversation um, about crime and criminality and associating that with immigrant communities, whether how much they contribute economically, socially, and culturally to that locality is important.
Hey, Oliver, we had a question that came through on another channel over here that I wanted to pose to you because it kind of goes along with what you're talking about right now in terms of not only championing the cities themselves, but this question is around how to kind of build coalitions to push immigrant inclusion. So, if you have any recommendations around some kind of safe grassroots movements or measurements that communities can take to build those coalitions to really help push that immigrant inclusion. And, as a result of that, then having some information there to champion those cities and those communities.
Mm. Well, a lot of the work that we do in coalition. As I mentioned, specifically, um, maybe the type of the work that we do, it looks a little different, but because we focus on at the federal level, um, we do a lot of collaboration with criminal justice organizations, with organizations that support survivors of domestic violence, with folks who are working with addressing the harms of the war on drugs, etc. So I would say that from our perspective, a lot of our work is done in coalition. At the local level, the coalitions that we support and the organizations that we support, they're like in Washington State, Texas, Arizona, New York. All of those organizations do their work in coalition. I think they understand the importance of like not doing this work in silos. Um, yeah, and I think this is the moment to if you've um haven't uh like if there's a sector that you see that there's an opportunity to build with, like this is the moment to take that first step if you haven't taken it yet. And if you already have connections in that area, I think this is the time to um, uh, one, show solidarity with the work that they do, and to also share what type of needs that the community has in this moment. Um, yeah, I know it's more of a general answer, but that's kind of like how I think the collaboration is kind of uh, at the center of the work that we do with especially around like tracking and fighting back against this anti-immigrant laws and at the federal level.
Great, thank you for that. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions here. So the next one for you is if a client wants to self-deport, do you have any resources on that, or do you know where someone can get those resources?
It's yeah, thank you for the question. It's a very tough decision to make. Um, we don't. I would say just to be transparent, we don't have any specific resources. There's one organization that we've collaborated with, but they're in Mexico City, and I know folks are from different areas, so um, I don't have those resources for you. I think I can find out. I know um, from at least one of our member organizations, that is something that they've also have requested because um, folks that they're in coalition with have been debating. I would say also, it's a lot of, I think one, and I know some reporters have tried to highlight this, and it's still a very small percentage, I think, of our community that is taking that very tough decision. But that is a gap that and the lack of resources in that area. So
Okay.
I don't, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate that. The last question we'll address here is this individual states that they had heard that the CBP1 app has turned into a deportation tool. Do you know if that is true? And should people delete or stop using that app?
Yeah, in the briefings that I mentioned, that ILRC does, I know that was a question that people brought up, and there is and I think I checked with folks on this. There is a within the app of turning off the location service, like the tracker, that make sure that you turn them off. For people that have like an active case, I think I have to talk to your attorney to make sure like how that, like deleting the actual app, if they has anything, it would affect anything in your case. But if you, yeah, I think at least at the very minimum to turn off the location tracker within that app to make, because yeah, I think that they've turned it into an enforcement mechanism to find people.
Unfortunate, but I appreciate the question and the response to that. So thanks, Oliver. That got us to the end of our questions. We did it. So thank you all for the questions that you posed to Oliver today. And Oliver, just a big thank you to you for taking the time to share this information with our members today. Like I said at the beginning, know you are extremely busy right now with everything going on. So we really do appreciate your time. Just a couple of quick reminders as we wind up. The webinar has been and is being recorded. We'll get this over to you hopefully by the end of the week, but you'll definitely be getting the full recording here shortly. And if you are coming to the interactive, we're less than 60 days away from that, believe it or not. So hopefully you will all be there. Please find us. Please come say hello. We'd love to see you there. If you have any questions about it, you can go to our website and see all the information about the interactive there and the agenda and speakers and such. Someone just asked for Oliver's email and he just entered it in there. So let me make sure that that goes out to everyone. Just copy that real quick before we go. And I'm gonna just type it in here. There we go. I think that went out to everyone there. So thanks for Oliver for that. Thank you all again for joining today. We really appreciate it and hope you found this information helpful. Oliver, thank you again. And I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone, and we will see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you. Bye.